Rules Committee come to order, and thank you very much for joining us this evening. Before we go too far, I want to acknowledge we've got a former member, a really good guy who is visiting us, Michael Arcuri. And Michael, you're 4 years here on the Rules Committee. I know it seemed like 20, but we're delighted you're back, and I would yield to the gentleman from Massachusetts.
I'm thrilled to see Mike here. He was a great member, and he reminds me of better times when the Democrats were in control of the House and all was well in the country. But in any event, it's great to see you, and thanks for all the great work that you did while you were here.
And delighted that you're back to visit us. Thank you very much. Tonight, the Rules Committee will consider a bill from Dr. Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, H.R. 5682, to approve the Keystone XL pipeline. For over 6 years, the American people have waited for the Obama administration to approve construction of the Keystone pipeline. We're here tonight. We're here tonight because Senate Democrats have repeatedly refused to consider this important issue, but now they want it done. So after this long, I think, an unnecessary delay, the House is willing and going to provide the Senate with a bill from Dr. Cassidy that they can pass and send to the President's desk. At a time in which the middle class, I still think, is paying too high gas prices, but I am pleased to see the prices come down dramatically. Too many Americans are out of work, and I'm glad that tonight we also have a jobs bill that's right before us. It's not just an opportunity to do business with a great trading partner, Canada, those friends of ours to the north, but also we're going to get it done because it will bring jobs to America. This afternoon I called Chairman Whitfield and asked him if he would come, and he gleefully agreed. And Ed Whitfield from Kentucky, the House Subcommittee on Energy and Power Subcommittee Chairman, is going to share his views on this bill. And I'm delighted that you're here, Ed. And before we go to you, I want to acknowledge Judge Hastings being here and see if the gentleman from Massachusetts has anything he'd like to provide for an opening statement. Gentleman's recognized.
Well, thank you. I thank you, Mr. Chairman, and it's great to see Chairman Whitfield here. And this is an issue that we have debated over and over and over and over and over again. I guess we're going to do it one more time. So my suggestion is we can listen to Chairman Whitfield, cut the political commercial, and then move on. And so I yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back his time. Well, the gentleman, we will yield to him and invite him for, if that's a political commercial, fine, but I think it's about serious policy, jobs in America, and a great and better relationship with our friends to the north, the Canadians, who have really stayed with us on this exercise. Without objection, anything the gentleman has right will be entered into the record.
Well, Chairman Sessions, thank you very much, and thank all of you members of the Rules Committee for giving me the opportunity to be here to talk about this important issue. I think the recent election affirmed that the majority of the American people are genuinely concerned about a struggling economy and the lack of job creation. And this is a piece of legislation that gives us an opportunity to create some jobs and also make America less dependent on the Middle East. When President Obama first became president, all of you remember we spent trillions of dollars on a stimulus package that he wanted addressed. We passed it. Many of us voted against it, including myself, but he said that this was a stimulus package that would be going for shovel-ready projects. As it turned out, a lot of the money went for renewable energy projects. Many of those are in bankruptcy today. The difference in this legislation and that stimulus package is that there will be jobs created immediately from the construction of this pipeline. That's why labor unions support it overwhelmingly. That's why even Chris Matthews described President Obama's rejection of Keystone as a mistake. So the only difference is that this pipeline will be built with private dollars, not government dollars. So I'm thrilled that the U.S. Senate, under the leadership of Senator Harry Reid, has made a decision that they want to move this bill. As you know, we've passed this legislation 7 or 8 times on the House side, and the Senate would not take it up. But they've had a change of heart. So we're thrilled with that. And so I'm here to testify on behalf of H.R. 5682, which will approve the Keystone XL pipeline application. I might remind all of you, this application was filed in September of 2008. And every time that the State Department has looked at the environmental impact of this pipeline, each time they have concluded that it would be of insignificant environmental impact. And so it's always been amazing to us that the President refuses to approve it, even though Secretary Clinton, Secretary Kerry, their Department of State, each time has said it would be of minor environmental impact, of insignificant environmental impact. So I'm here to simply plead that we take this bill back to the floor. I think the Senate is going to pass this legislation, and we want to send a bill to the President, because I would, for one, like for him to say, if he decides to veto it, I hope he doesn't, I hope that he will approve it, sign this bill, get these jobs going. It will bring 830,000 barrels of oil per day to America through this pipeline. But the good news is, if we can send it down to the White House, if the President decides to veto it, that for the first time he will be telling the American people why he wants to veto it. I think that he will sign it because I think the Senate's going to pass it. We're going to pass it again. And it is legislation that the American people needs, as I said, make us less dependent on foreign oil. It will have a negligible environmental impact. All studies have indicated that. And this pipeline has been sitting there, its application pending now for over 6 years. So I would respectfully request that you all approve a rule, get this bill to the floor as soon as possible. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I note that the bill that you bring to us today is, I said 3 pages, and the gentlewoman from North Carolina, Mrs. Fox, the Vice Chairman of the committee, told me, no, it's 2. It's 2 pages. It's 2 powerful pages that allow us to be not just very specific, but really that the American people, the case has been sold.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't take 3,000 pages.
Right.
You can be succinct, you can talk about how you can get things done, and you can get it done. And this is an example, Mr. Chairman, of the kind of leadership that not only you've been after us to do at this committee, but that you're showing up to get done a 2-page bill.
I might add that the Senate Democratic staff have been in touch with our staff and requesting that we move this bill as soon as possible. And some of the legislation has been reworded in a minor way, and that's why it ends up being a 2-page bill.
Right. Well, I'm just really pleased, Ed, and I really, when I spoke to you today, I said, look, come up here and really give us a blast. Tell us why this is a good thing. I think it's been sold to the American people, but I think you deserve a lot of credit. You and Dr. Cassidy have done a great job. Thank you very much. I'm delighted that you're here.
Thank you.
And more importantly, congratulations on coming back.
Thank you. Thank you.
Gentlewoman, Mrs. Fox, recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am very grateful to the gentleman from Kentucky for being here and bringing us this bill. I have no questions. I look forward to our voting on it in this committee and voting on the floor and trying again to get it passed. Thank you.
And thank you so much.
I yield back.
Thanks so much for keeping the chairman up to speed on the number of pages in this bill.
You know, sometimes I count past 2. I get to 3 and I'm wrong, as Virginia.
Okay.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. Gentleman yields back time. Gentleman, Massachusetts recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Look, I mean, I have some issues with this bill. I mean, I think the Keystone Pipeline will increase carbon pollution and threaten water resources, but that's my opinion, and people have different views on this. But I think whether you support this or oppose it, you know, I'm a little concerned about some of the provisions in the bill that require any challenge to a federal action related to Keystone XL Pipeline be heard by the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals rather than the usual courts of jurisdiction. So this effectively denies access to court to anyone who can't afford to hire D.C. lawyers and come here to pursue their claim. In other words, local landowners, small businesses, and concerned citizens. And it's an example of the Washington knows best mentality that my Republican colleagues usually oppose. But Mr. Chairman, you mentioned that we've passed this 7 or 8 times, this Keystone right?
Right.
I mean, aren't those bills over in the Senate right now?
They are, absolutely.
So if we got 7 or 8 Keystone Pipeline bills in the Senate, why do we need a 9th bill?
Well, my understanding that Senator Reid wants to pass this bill at the request of Senator Landrieu to help her in a U.S. Senate race that she's involved in. And to accommodate that, we have introduced this bill to make some minor changes that they requested.
So this bill is identical to the bill that Senator Landrieu is going to...
Basically identical. Yeah.
Excuse me, if I could, exactly what we were asked to do, because we do not want to delay that. I'm sorry, I'd had this discussion, Mr. Chairman, so we've been told this is exactly what Senate wants done.
Right.
So we're trying to accommodate that. And as a matter of fact, this is an emergency meeting to do it.
I know it is an emergency meeting, and again, we had a hearing not too long ago, Mr. Nugent held about kind of the proper rules and procedures of the House, and you know, I think one of the things we talked about was that you know, these kinds of meetings, and again, I mean, whether we met today or met tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, it doesn't make any difference on this particular issue. We're here for a few weeks, I think. You know, this was introduced today. I'm not even sure this bill has officially been referred to your committee yet by the Speaker. It's been so newly introduced. I'm not even sure it's online yet. I guess maybe it's online in the Rules Committee, but for the general public, no CBO score. I don't know. Again, I mean, I get it. There's politics, and it is what it is. But you know, I hope this is the end of it, and that we kind of go back to a regular order and do things a little bit differently around here.
I agree with that.
You're back.
Gentleman yields back his time. By the way, those are very good comments that the gentleman from Massachusetts makes about kind of the circumstance that we're in and why we're trying to accommodate, as the young chairman alluded to. The gentleman from Utah is recognized.
Thank you very much. And actually, it is a 2-page bill, but if you'd single-spaced, it could be a 1-page bill. You could tighten this thing up if you really wanted to, Chairman. I appreciate you doing this. The gentleman from Massachusetts raised a couple of questions that are interesting. I'm assuming there have been hearings on this issue, not necessarily this bill.
There have been a lot of hearings on the Keystone Pipeline.
And this is on a form that the Senate has indicated they're willing to accept, which have been criticisms of passing things over they didn't want to accept. This is one where they actually are.
Absolutely.
And you still allow people to sue on this one, but you do have expedited referral.
Right.
Which simply means what? That expedited referral simply means what? That if any suits take place, they will be decided quickly and timely manner, and we can actually move forward. Yeah,
and I might say that many environmental groups are thrilled when it comes to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia.
Seems a common court that is taken for these types of actions. You have done well in coming up with a bill that seems like this is one of those things that can go through the system and illustrate that we can actually reach out. We can do something. We do something quickly when we have desire on both sides of this Capitol building to do it. Thank you for bringing it up here. I look forward to supporting it.
Thank you.
Yield back.
Very much, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Whitfield, if this matter were arising in Kentucky, would you want your local persons to be able to litigate in Kentucky courts, or would you prefer that they have to litigate in the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeal?
Well, I have no objection to them going to the U.S. Court of Appeals. I think that, as I said, this matter has been before Congress. The application's been pending for 8 years, and anytime you go into federal court, it is expensive and it takes a lot of time, but it's going to get expedited review at the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia.
And know that to be true, that it would be expedited review? D.C. Circuit Court is no different than any other court when it comes to determining when they're going to make a decision.
Well, I mean, I can't obviously commit to what the justices may or may not do, but that's our understanding. And I will say this, I've visited almost every civic club in my district, and I'm always asked questions about Keystone. I've always said that I support Keystone. The Department of State it basically supports Keystone because the environmental impacts are negligible. The labor unions support it.
Some labor unions.
Well, some. But I think that this bill, the mere fact that Senator Reid is willing to bring this to the floor illustrates that there's almost unanimous support.
The irony isn't lost on me. Your argument a minute ago, the chairman, was that this was exactly what Senator Reid wanted, and you argued to help Senator Landrieu. I just got in here in this emergency hearing, and I think this bill is styled. Mr. Cassidy introduced the following bill.
Absolutely.
So I gather that this should be put on the politics of the Senate and on the politics.
Yeah, and we hope it does help Congressman Cassidy.
I understand, and so Reid hopes that it helps Landrieu. I got news for both of them. It ain't going to make much difference, but it makes a difference to you all to make your political statement about Keystone, as it does to Harry Reid.
Well, I might just interject, if I may, just briefly. I genuinely believe, and I think most people that support this genuinely believe that it will be helpful to the American people.
Okay. Let's deal with that and then go back to the question that I asked you initially, and that is, if it was in Kentucky, would you not want your local landowners, your small businesses, and concerned citizens who may not have the resources to have lawyers or fly into the Beltway to the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeal, would you not want them to be able to litigate in Kentucky, as I'm sure, just from television, nothing, no words from anybody, no staff or anything, but television, I saw several landowners, I might add Republican and Democrat in Nebraska, that were talking about litigation. Now, those people are going to be required to come here to Washington, D.C., and is this a precedent? Are we now getting ready when we see litigation, as all matters are likely to wind up in a court of law? Are we then going to require the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeal to handle all litigation? Is that something that you all think is reasonable?
Well, let me tell you, I don't have any problem with going back to Kentucky and defending the language in this bill, if that's what they say.
That's not what I asked you, Ed. What I asked you is, would you not prefer that your local persons, the same ones that you go to that ask you about this particular measure, that if they wanted to litigate something about coal in Kentucky, would you not prefer that they litigated in Kentucky's federal courts and or state courts, as it were, as opposed to the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeal?
Well, a lot of the issues relating to coal are ended up in the Court of Appeals here in the District of Columbia, and many lawsuits have been filed here. I support this legislation, and I don't have any problem telling my constituents that because this is a national issue, it crosses international boundaries, that I think it's appropriate that the lawsuits be filed in the U.S. District Court of Appeals in the District of Columbia.
All right. Well, I'll take that as I ain't going to answer the question that you asked. If it was in Florida, and if they were talking about offshore drilling, I don't want the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals to be the court of first instance that has to handle a matter of that kind. And I have said on record, and I continue to say, if all of this leads, all of this massive energy production, which seems to be on the minds of many, Republican and Democrat, if it leads to offshore drilling in Florida, then I'll be the last person standing opposed to it. And I have exacting reasons, and I would think if we were to think through this thing very carefully here, this particular tar sands oil, a friend of mine was just the manager in Port Arthur, Texas, where a portion of this is going to wind up. His name is Floyd Johnson. I like to call names. Floyd is an excellent county manager. He was county manager of my county for a while, and he advocates for the Keystone Pipeline. So I asked him, I said, Floyd, when it ends up, how many jobs are there going to be? He hesitated, and I know exactly why he hesitated. I ask you, how many jobs are there going to be when it's all finished? And it's in Texas now, and it's being refined. And the second part of that question is, where is the oil going to go? Is it going to go to the pumps in Kentucky and Florida that allow for us to pay for less fuel? or is it going to go to other markets in the international realm?
Well, all the hearings that we've had, the witnesses that have testified say that the jobs created to construct this pipeline will be in the thousands. And I don't have any reason not to believe that when the labor unions support it. I've also been told that oil is an international commodity. Some of it will end up in the international markets, but some of it will be refined in the U.S. and will be consumed by American consumers.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me see, can I help you with the answer?
Sure.
I genuinely believe that there will be some jobs, and I would imagine Senator Landrieu and Congressman Cassidy feel that many in the oil industry, some of whom may be labor persons, are likely, if jobs are not being produced in their area, are able to translate into work on this Trans-Canada pipeline. But by all accounts, when it's finished, there will be a handful of people running it. Now, I don't know whether you've seen pipelines. I have. I traveled with the former chairman of this committee all over the stans, Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, all of them. And we looked at pipelines. We looked at the ones that were proposed to be sent to an area that you and I have a continuing concern in Turkey. Jerry and I did that along with other congresspersons. And then on a trip with Newt Gingrich, we went to the Alaska pipeline. You don't see very many people working once these pipelines are concluded. And especially in today's electronic monitoring, the likelihood is you would be very lucky if there will be 200 jobs that wind up in Texas handling this matter. But let me carry on for a moment and give you the results of an article in Forbes magazine. One of the few sectors that has gained full head of steam, according to this article written by Forbes staff contributor Ellen Wall, during the weak U.S. economic recovery is the energy industry. Many pundits and politicians see it as a jobs panacea. During the presidential debates last October, the two candidates, that would be Mr. Obama and Mr. Romney, claimed that energy sector would create anywhere from 600,000 to 3.5 million jobs. Numerous experts, Hastings and Whitfield in this case, advanced differing economic impact projections in order to support their positions on energy policy and proposed projects. The truth is, according to Ms. Wall and Forbes editorial persons, that accurately estimating the number of jobs that could be created is impossible. As we consider the claims, the backers of the proposed Keystone XL pipeline, I wish it was key lime pie, are making, as to its potential economic benefits, it's instructive to consider the case that was made for the construction of Trans-Alaska pipeline and how the project played out in reality. I won't bore the committee or you, Mr. Whitfield, but we do know that the Alyeska pipeline service company constructed the Alaska pipeline, and that consortium was composed of BP, who has this outstanding record in our country in Louisiana for Mr. Cassidy and Ms. Landrieu's understandings, which they still have not paid off all of their claims, and the fish are still showing up distorted. But BP, ConocoPhillips Transportation, ExxonMobil, Koch, Alaska Pipeline, which has a vested interest in this particular one, and Unocal. And then it talked about the governor opening it up, and it goes into a number of other stats, and then it gives the estimates for job creation statistics. It continued to fluctuate. From time to time, it was planned, was first planned until the label was set. In March, they estimated 26,000 people. That was in '73. And these numbers will later drop significantly to 18,000 construction jobs. By January, once union contracts for labor had been negotiated and estimated, it dropped to 13,000 jobs that would be created. at its peak. During the summer, with initial work on the pipeline was getting started, there were about 14,000 jobs, and they estimated that between 14 and 18,000 workers would be required in the summer. In reality, Alyeska did employ 21,000 workers during the peak construction. And then it goes on to get to the nitty-gritty of the handful of people down to 6,005 and eventually down to the handful of persons that now operate the Alaska pipeline. And we all know some other aspects of that with Prudhoe Bay and some of the other things. The short of what I'm trying to get across to you is that if I listened to my colleagues, Republican and Democrat, Mary Landrieu and Cassidy, and countless others, during the 5 weeks that we were not here in the run-up to the election, and incidentally, congratulations to y'all. Y'all fooled them again. And doubtless you will learn that the wind does not blow up the same dog's tail always, but it's just a matter of time. But in the meantime, what winds up happening here is if we looked at everything that was being said, it was as if we were going to have 600,000 jobs. Nobody ever used that figure. I'm saying that, but it was, I remember the words, a stunning amount of jobs, Senator McConnell said, and Speaker Boehner used almost the exact reference, a stunning amount of jobs. 18,000 jobs is a lot of jobs. It's a lot of jobs to the person that may have the job. But don't give people the impression that that's going to be 18,000 jobs ad infinitum and that it will multiply. It will decrease. And I think anybody in here knows that. And I just want to set the record straight. And the better reference would be other pipelines. And I didn't bother to pull all of the data on them. But every one that has ever been constructed anywhere in the world has had a decrease in employment. And that's what needs to get across to people. In the meantime, you don't ever give this president credit for anything. Not you, Ed Whitfield, but my friends in the Republican Party and my friends abroad in the Republican country that votes for them in minimum numbers of people after suppressing and oppressing people. This president gets no credit. I would assume that if President Bush was still president, that we would be talking about the fact that for the first time in a long time, I paid less than $4 for gasoline, really closer to $3.33 the last time I gassed up at home. The president gets no credit for that. All of this energy production must have come about just because Republicans supported the Keystone Pipeline. I don't think so. And I think we need to have a better understanding, and that will come in time. It may very well pass. But what I want people to know is that it is not going to be a jobs panacea. It will have some temporary jobs. I might add some that have already gone into Illinois, some that have already gone into Nebraska, where some of the litigation is still ongoing, and you haven't made it clear to me what happens to that litigation. Does it then get removed to the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeal? There are so many tentacles to this, and all I say is let the process play out. Haste makes waste. My grandmama taught me that a long time. Whether it's 2 pages or 2,000, this place can mess anything up. Thank you.
Well, may I just reply briefly?
Of course.
Obviously, I can't give a figure on permanent employment that will be there because of Keystone Pipeline. I can tell you, I've sat through many hours of hearings about this, and we've had many small businesses come in and testify that product has already been purchased by the pipeline in anticipation of this being approved from in Ohio, Pennsylvania, other states providing material. So the fact that the unions support it, many small businesses, large businesses.
Stop saying that. All of the unions do not support it. And when you say the unions, specify
the contract unions then.
Yeah,
the contractors,
right.
they support it.
Identify, because there are a lot of unions that don't support it.
But all I'm saying is that there will be jobs created, and I don't know what the permanent number will be. And I would like to just clarify one other issue as well. My understanding is, on the lawsuits, that if it's a federal question, it will be going to the D.C. Court of Appeals in the District of Columbia. If it's a state issue, they still will be able to file lawsuits in the individual state affected by the state law that might be in question.
Okay. Is the Keystone Pipeline Group exempted from mitigating any damages that might occur in this particular litigation?
Are they prevented from mitigating?
No. Are they required to mitigate
in this
Any
legislation.
damages, and if damages occur, as BP did in Louisiana, if damages occur, what is their liability?
Well, I mean, they're going to be subject to every environmental law that's out there right now, and there's more safety issues covered under this Keystone Pipeline legislation than any pipeline that has been built before. So they're not getting a shortcut on any mitigation issues relating to environmental issues. I know that for a fact.
Yeah, well, let's keep our fingers crossed.
Thank you.
Gentleman yields back his time. Thank you very much. The gentleman from Florida.
I always love following the gentleman from Florida. He's always, I appreciate it.
Colorful.
Colorful.
No pun intended.
Eloquent in so many ways. We've passed this Keystone Pipeline. We've called for it in the 4 years I've been here on numerous occasions. And so now things seem to have changed within the Senate because now they're asking for the legislation to come back to them so they can act on it. And I think you hit on the politics of it as to why. But, you know, we weren't playing politics with this 4 years ago when we first voted on it. You know, people have been asking me in my district, you know, when is the Keystone Pipeline going to be voted on and put into law? Now, it doesn't necessarily affect them directly. But I do have constituents within my district that actually make the huge pumps, the casings for the pumps for the Keystone Pipeline. It's important to them because that keeps that foundry going, one of the few foundries in America, I will tell you, that produces that. We also have pipe manufacturers within the state of Florida that produce it. And, you know, the gentleman from Florida is correct. These aren't going to be, you know, continuing sustained jobs, but they do help the economy. And those that work in refineries, we don't have one in Florida, but those that are in the refineries that will receive this oil or the transport locations where it's coming through, they all have a benefit. Am I not correct? I mean,
Absolutely. I mean, they've testified to that effect, and many products are being produced that will be going into this pipeline.
well, I mean, and that's jobs, whether it's new jobs or sustaining current jobs. I think that's what we're hearing from the American public is that it doesn't seem like we care about even sustaining the current jobs that we have. This helps sustain current jobs. This does add some new jobs. If it's one new job, I will tell you to the person that gets that job, that's a big deal. It's a huge deal. And so when people want to say that this is being politicized, I would suggest to you if it was just today, this is the first time this came up, I would say, yeah, you're right. And we're trying to help out, you know, Republican candidate for in the Senate race as the Democrats are trying to help a Democratic senator. But we've been calling for this in the 4 years I've been here. We've been calling for this and calling for this. And today, there's movement in the Senate, and I don't care why they want to do it. I don't think they're doing it for the right reasons. But we've been doing it for the right reasons from the get-go. So it really isn't a question. I just want to make that statement, Mr. Chairman, to set the record straight. And I do appreciate it. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. Thank you very much. Gentleman from Colorado is recognized.
Thank you. I'd like to quote, when was your last briefing from the administration on where they were in this decision-making process?
I think it was about 6 months ago, committee staff.
Well, you know, and obviously, you know, certainly there's a lot of issues here around environmental impact and siting and permits, and it would seem to me that there should be a update at least from the executive branch. Maybe, who knows, maybe they're ready to announce next week whether they approve this or not. I don't know. But it seems like in the absence of that information, I would just encourage you, prior to bringing this to the floor, to see where the administration is at, whether it's Secretary, is it at Secretary Kerry? Is that where the decision is currently? So either him or one of his deputies can perhaps provide an update. But it just seems premature to go around a process that may or may not have legitimate issues. Again, I think that you or I as members have limited visibility into this. Certainly as a member not on the committee, I have very limited visibility into this. You probably have a little bit more, but 6 months is a long time, and I think it would behoove Republicans and Democrats on the committee to know what are the pending issues, are there any, is there a timeline, because we don't want to We don't want to shortcut around things that our own government may be doing to look out for American interests rather than Canadian interests. We all appreciate our ally Canada. But I do not know, as a rank and file member, and I guess if you haven't been updated in 6 months, it's unlikely that committee members know exactly what the remaining issues are. And I think before I could support anything like this, I think that would be very, very important. So don't expect you to withdraw this and hold a hearing, but I just wanted to add that I think it's premature given that the last briefing was 6 months ago.
Well, Mr. Polis, I appreciate your comments, and I might say, as this application was filed over 6 years ago, 6 months ago, when we had this conversation with the Secretary of State office, it was clear to us that there were really no environmental issues still outstanding. And my conclusion was, and maybe I was wrong, but my conclusion was that it was a political decision that the President was going to make. And truthfully, I, for one, do not believe that he will ever approve the pipeline. But I do appreciate your suggestion that maybe we should touch base with them. But I hope that that would not delay the movement of this legislation, which we think is so important.
Well, I would add, in fact, the decision will likely lie with the President, because, as you know, the way a bill becomes law is House passes, Senate passes it. That might seem that this might even occur here, but the third thing that has to occur is the President needs to sign it.
Right.
It seems likely that even if he moves to approve it, it probably wouldn't be by signing this bill, because this bill has other things that hamstring them. It would likely simply be an approval under the current application or a disapproval. But either way, the President is there. So, I mean, unless there's, I guess we'll be watching to see if 2/3 want to shortcut the process in both bodies. But absent that, it's a bit of an exercise in futility, because whether it passes or doesn't pass, there is still, a decision that the Secretary will have to make, or perhaps the President. We certainly eagerly await that. I think both proponents and opponents of the pipeline would like to see a decision made. And without having been briefed by the administration, I don't know if that's a week away or another 6 months or a year away, in which case there probably should be additional hearings here to see where that process is. So no other questions. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. Gentlewoman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I look forward to supporting this bill.
Thank you very much. Gentleman yields back his time. Gentleman from Louisville, Texas is recognized. Gentleman does not seek time. Mr. Whitfield, thank you very much. I think your testimony was not only on point and enlightening, but quite honestly, I was invigorated by your enthusiasm of what this represents for the American people. Very succinct answers, but with a lot of quality behind it. And I want to thank you very much for taking your time to be with us today.
Well, thank you, Mr. Sessions. Look forward to working with you.
Thank you very much. I do not see any other members that seek time on this bill. So this closes the hearing portion of H.R. 5682, and the chairman would be in receipt of a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Gentleman's recognized.
I move the committee grant H.R. 5682 to approve the Keystone XL pipeline, a closed rule. The rule provides 1 hour debate equally divided among controlled by the chair and the ranking minority member of the Committee on Transportation Infrastructure and the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Energy and Commerce. The rule waives all points of orders against consideration of the bill. The rule provides that the bill should be considered as read. The rule waives all points of orders against provisions in the bill. Finally, the rule provides one motion to recommit.
You've now heard the motion from the gentleman from Utah. Is there further discussion or amendment?
Yes.
Gentleman from Massachusetts recognized.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment to the rule. I move that the committee grant H.R. 5682 an open rule so that all members have the opportunity to offer amendments to the bill on the floor. We have heard from the colleagues on the Democratic side of some concerns about some issues in the way the bill was written. I think we ought to give members the opportunity to be able to deliberate on this, whether it's on, getting a status report from the White House as to where they are on this, or whether it's an amendment that says that this fuel has to stay, this oil has to stay in the United States to benefit the citizens of this country, to lower prices or whatever. But there are a lot of different ideas out there. This is not an emergency. We can deliberate on this for a couple of days, and we ought to have an open rule. And I urge my colleagues to support it. And
Landslide.
So you've now heard the motion from the gentleman from Massachusetts. We're seeing now the ranking member of the committee, Mrs. Slaughter, as she comes in the room with the knowledge that today her vote count ended, and in fact she was declared the winner of her congressional district, and we would welcome the gentlewoman from New York.
When I come in, it's always like this, right?
Well,
This thanks everybody. It was a landslide. It was just incredible. But it's good to be back. Look forward to working here again. I would have missed you something terrible.
good. Thank you very much. We're delighted that you're here.
Me too. Thanks.
You've now heard the
Thank you.
You've now heard the motion from the gentleman from Massachusetts. I would respond back quite simply by saying that we believe that I'm opposed to this. What we're trying to do, and we've come into an emergency session, we were asked to do this by the Senate, who has encouraged not only the committee, Energy and Commerce Committee, but there have been bipartisan, bicameral discussions about this. And the bill as submitted was exactly what we were asked to do by people in the Senate so that this could move forward and not be debated for longer a period of time, and so that we could offer a chance to work together, and I think that's what we're doing. Further discussion? Those in favor of the amendment, of the motion, of the amendment, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no? No. Noes have it. Noes
That's
have
for a
it.
roll call, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman asks for a roll call vote.
Ms. Fox, Mr. Bishop. Mr. Bishop, no. Mr. Cole, Mr. Woodall, Mr. Nugent. Mr. Nugent, no. Mr. Webster. Mr. Webster, no. Ms. Ross-Leitonen. Ms. Ross-Leitonen, no. Mr. Burgess. Mr. Burgess, no. Ms. Slaughter. Ms. Slaughter, aye. Mr. McGovern.
Aye.
Mr. McGovern, aye. Mr. Hastings. Mr. Hastings, aye. Mr. Polis. Mr. Polis, aye. Mr. Chairman.
No.
Mr. Chairman, no.
Clerk will report the total.
4 yeas, 6 nays.
The amendment is not agreed to. Further amendment or discussion? Seeing none, the vote will now be on the motion from the gentleman from Utah. Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. So, yes, sir.
Roll call, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman asked for a roll call
And a
vote.
hearing aid.
Clerk will poll the committee.
Ms. Fox, Mr. Bishop. Mr. Bishop, aye. Mr. Cole, Mr. Woodall, Mr. Nugent. Mr. Nugent, aye. Mr. Webster. Mr. Webster, aye. Ms. Ross-Leitonen. Ms. Ross-Leitonen, aye. Mr. Burgess. Mr. Burgess, aye. Ms. Slaughter. No. Ms. Slaughter, no. Mr. McGovern. Mr. McGovern, no. Mr. Hastings. Mr. Hastings, no. Mr. Polis. Mr. Polis, no. Mr. Chairman.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, aye.
Clerk will report the total.
6 yeas, 4 nays.
The amendment is, the motion is agreed to. Motion is agreed to, and I will be handling this for the committee tomorrow.
And Mr. Polis for our
And
side.
Mr. Poles will be handling that. I want to state, because I'm sure lots of people will be asking, when are we going to meet again?
Probably tomorrow.
So the answer is we do not expect another meeting this week.
I can understand that this was an emergency, and we
We
really
held
had
this
to
just for you,
fight.
Louise.
Somebody said there's an emergency rules meeting. I said, is there any other kind?
Well, that we could, but this
Yeah.
was an emergency, so thank
We
you
don't
very
care
much.
about committees, do we?
Yeah, and by the way, I announced if we're here in a late night, that you and I are going to serve.
feed the crowd.
We're going to serve dinner in these next couple of weeks. We've got a lot of work left to do. We're back after the election with some renewed interest, and this represents it. Gentleman from Florida, yes, sir.
I'm advised by my personal parliamentarian here that I could ask for unanimous consent that my vote be counted.
And we would give it.
The committee, I hear a question about the gentleman who is, does the gentleman seek for us to have a revote?
That would be wonderful if that
The gentleman's request, if you'll hold for just one moment, please. All right, without objection, we will vacate the vote, and the chairman would now ask for those in favor of the motion signify that has been presented, H.R. 5682, by the gentleman of Utah, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. The ayes have it. The gentlewoman asks for a roll call vote. Clerk will please poll the committee.
Ms. Fox, Mr. Bishop. Mr. Bishop, aye. Mr. Cole. Mr. Cole, aye. Mr. Woodall. Mr. Nugent. Mr. Nugent, aye. Mr. Webster. Mr. Webster, aye. Ms. Ross-Lehtinen. Ms. Ross-Lehtinen, aye. Mr. Burgess. Mr. Burgess, aye. Ms. Slaughter. No. Ms. Slaughter, no. Mr. McGovern. Mr. McGovern, no. Mr. Hastings.
Well, he voted against it before he voted it not at all. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir, he is. How should the gentleman be reported? You would be the gentleman be recorded. The gentleman would be recorded as a no.
Mr. Hastings, no. Mr. Polis. Mr. Chairman.
I'll be an aye.
Mr. Chairman, aye.
Clerk will report the total.
7 yeas, 3 nays.
The motion is agreed to. The motion is agreed to. Well, look. In a genuine way, I do appreciate what the gentleman said. And Mr. Cole, we're delighted. I know that you were busy. You told me you'd be busy, but I'm glad that you were here to be on record with that. I don't think we're going to try and fool each other with what we did here today, and we certainly made sure it was done legally. And legally, as a matter of fact, I'd like to defer, if I can, before we get out of here. We had previously said, "Wow, Michael, you look great." Yes. 4 beautiful years here. Yeah. This gentlewoman wish to be meeting you. I do. Gentlewoman's recognized.
Mike Arcuri is one of the nicest and smartest people I think to ever serve from New York State, and I'm very proud of him and glad to see him back here in any capacity. Rather you be a member, but welcome back. Okay. Yeah, me too.
Gentlewoman yields back her time. As a matter of fact, we did not only greet Mike, but I've greeted him out in the hall, and then Jim did the same, and so we're delighted that you're here. Okay, now we'll see if we can start over here. Does anybody think we ought to meet later this week? Well, then I have no intention at this point of us meeting this week. So the committee has now finished its job. We know that I'm going to handle this for the Republicans. Mr. Polis is for the Democrats. We've now completed our work, and the committee is now done.